The blood-soaked letter trembled in Sarah Ainsworth's hands as she stared at the cruel words scrawled in black ink. "We have your daughter. You no longer exist." Her entire world collapsed into that single sheet of paper on a bitter Montana morning in 1876, exactly 1 year after she had fled to this remote homestead to escape her past. Sarah folded the letter with shaking fingers and tucked it into the pocket of her worn cotton dress. The small cabin that had been her sanctuary now felt like a prison. Through the window, she could see the empty swing she'd built for little Emma swaying in the autumn breeze. Just hours ago, her 4-year-old daughter had been playing there, golden curls bouncing as she laughed. Now, Emma was gone, snatched while Sarah had walked to the creek for water. Along with her child, they'd taken the documentation that proved Sarah's identity, her marriage certificate, the deed to her homestead, and the letter from the attorney confirming her new life and name. Without those papers, she had no legal claim to her daughter or her land. Sarah gathered what little food she could carry, her late husband's revolver, and mounted her aging mare. The nearest town was Redemption Creek, a half-day's ride across rugged terrain. If anyone could help her, it would be the sheriff, assuming he would believe a woman with no proof of who she was. The journey was punishing. Dark clouds gathered overhead, and soon rain poured down, soaking Sarah to the bone. By the time she reached Redemption Creek, her dress was mud-splattered, her dark blonde hair plastered to her face, and desperation had settled deep in her chest. The main street was mostly deserted due to the downpour. Sarah tied her horse outside the sheriff's office and pushed open the door, water dripping onto the wooden floorboards. Sheriff Milton Harris looked up from his desk, his weathered face frowning at the bedraggled woman before him. "Madam, you look like you've had a rough time of it." "My daughter's been kidnapped," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "They took her this morning from my homestead north of here." The sheriff stood, gesturing to a chair. "Sit down before you collapse. Who took your child?" "I don't know." Sarah remained standing, too agitated to sit. "I found this letter. They've taken my identification papers, too, everything that proves who I am and that Emma is mine." Sheriff Harris read the letter, his expression darkening. "Mrs. Ainsworth. Sarah Ainsworth. Mrs. Ainsworth, without any papers, it's going to be difficult to— Are you saying you won't help me find my daughter?" Sarah's voice rose in panic. "I'm saying that without proof of your identity, or that the child is yours, legally my hands are tied. For all I know, you could be trying to claim someone else's child." "She's my daughter." Sarah slammed her palms on his desk. The sheriff sighed. "I sympathize with your situation, but—" The door opened behind them, bringing with it the smell of rain and leather. Sarah turned to see a tall man removing his dripping hat. He had a rugged face with several days of stubble, piercing blue eyes, and a quiet confidence in his movements. "Sheriff?" The man nodded, then looked at Sarah with an assessing gaze. "Archer. Good timing," said the sheriff. "This woman claims her child's been taken." "Claims?" Sarah repeated bitterly. The newcomer Archer hung his hat on a peg and approached. "What happened?" Before the sheriff could answer, Sarah turned to face Archer directly. "Someone took my 4-year-old daughter from our homestead this morning. They also stole all my papers, everything that proves who I am and that Emma is mine." She thrust the letter at him. "They left this." Archer read the letter slowly, his expression unreadable. "Mind if I ask why someone would want to erase your identity, Mrs. Ainsworth? Sarah Ainsworth." She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I don't know who took her or why." The sheriff made a skeptical sound. "Without papers or witnesses who can verify your identity, I'll vouch for her," Archer said suddenly. Sarah stared at him in confusion. "But you don't know me. I know desperation when I see it, and I know a mother's grief." His eyes met hers with unexpected kindness. "And I know that no one leaves a note like this unless they have a personal vendetta." The sheriff looked between them. "Archer Xavier has good judgment, Mrs. Ainsworth. He used to ride with the Pinkerton agency before settling here." Archer turned back to the sheriff. "I'll help her find the child." "Now hold on," Sheriff Harris protested. "We don't have the manpower to—" "I didn't say you would help," Archer interrupted calmly. I said I would. Sarah looked at him with both suspicion and desperate hope. Why would you help a stranger? Archer's eyes held hers steady. Because someone once helped me when I had nothing. He paused. And because whoever took your child and your identity will likely return to finish whatever they started. A chill ran through Sarah at his words. You think they'll come back for me? People who go to these lengths usually have unfinished business. Archer turned to the sheriff. I'll take full responsibility for investigating this matter. Sheriff Harris sighed heavily. Fine. But don't cause any trouble in my jurisdiction, Xavier. Archer nodded and gestured for Sarah to follow him outside. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, and Sarah hugged her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look. Do you have a place to stay in town? Archer asked. Sarah shook her head. I came straight here. The hotel across the street is decent. Get a room, dry off, and meet me at the Silver Spur Saloon in an hour. We'll talk there. I don't have money for a hotel, Sarah admitted, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Without hesitation, Archer reached into his pocket and handed her several dollars. Consider it an advance. You can pay me back when we've found your daughter. Sarah stared at the money, then at him. Why are you really helping me, Mr. Xavier? A shadow passed across his face. Let's just say I've seen what happens when justice fails those who need it most. He settled his hat back on his head. 1 hour, Mrs. Ainsworth, the Silver Spur. Sarah watched him walk away, his tall figure cutting through the misty rain with purpose. For the first time since finding Emma's empty swing, she felt a flicker of hope. She didn't know why the stranger was willing to help her, but at the moment, he was all she had. The Paradise Hotel was indeed decent, if modest. Sarah used Archer's money to secure a small room and to purchase a simple change of clothes from the general store next door. After washing away the mud and changing, she felt marginally more human, though the ache of Emma's absence grew sharper with each passing minute. She arrived at the Silver Spur Saloon precisely 1 hour later. The establishment was relatively quiet at this afternoon hour, with only a few patrons scattered at tables. Archer sat in a corner booth, his back to the wall, a clear view of both entrances. 2 cups of coffee steamed on the table. Sarah slid into the seat across from him. Thank you for the money. I'll repay you. Archer pushed one of the coffees toward her. Drink. You look like you need it. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup gratefully. Mr. Xavier. Just Archer is fine. Archer, then, I need you to understand something. I have no money beyond what little I brought with me today. I can't pay you what a Pinkerton would normally charge. He studied her for a moment. I'm not a Pinkerton anymore, and I'm not asking for payment. Everyone wants something, Sarah countered. A faint smile touched his lips. Smart woman? He leaned forward. What I want is information. The full truth about why someone would take your daughter and try to erase your identity. Sarah tensed. I told you I don't know who... Mrs. Ainsworth, Archer cut in quietly. I can't help you if you lie to me. That note wasn't random. Someone targeted you specifically. Sarah stared into her coffee, weighing her options. This man was offering to help when no one else would. But sharing her past put her at risk. Then again, without Emma, what did she have left to lose? My name wasn't always Ainsworth, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before I came here, I was Sarah Abernathy, wife of William Abernathy, a wealthy mine owner in Colorado. Archer's expression remained neutral. Go on. William died under suspicious circumstances. His business partner, Elias Sutton, claimed William had gambling debts and had mortgaged everything to him. Overnight, I lost my home, my standing in society, and was about to lose my daughter too. Sarah's hands tightened around her cup. Sutton made it clear he would have me declared unfit as a mother and take Emma if I contested his claims. So you ran, Sarah nodded. A sympathetic attorney helped me establish a new identity. I used what little money I had left to buy the homestead north of here and start over. For a year, We were safe, her voice broke. Until today. And you believe this Sutton is behind the kidnapping? Who else could it be? The note even referred to erasing my identity, the very thing I did to escape him. Archer considered this. What did Sutton want with your daughter? Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. Emma is heir to her father's estate, or would be, if Sutton hadn't stolen it all. I think he wanted her under his control to solidify his claim to everything. Or to silence any questions about how he acquired your husband's assets, Archer added thoughtfully. A ward under his guardianship would make a convenient story. Sarah nodded, surprised by his quick understanding. Exactly. Did your husband have any other relatives who might have helped you? No. William's family was all gone. I have no family either. She looked down. We were alone. Archer was silent for a moment. The first thing we need to do is determine if Sutton is indeed behind this, and if so, where he might have taken Emma. How do we do that without alerting him that I'm looking? We start by checking if anyone in town saw strangers recently, especially anyone asking about a woman and child living alone. Archer took a sip of his coffee. Do you have a photograph of Emma? Sarah's face fell. It was with my papers. Describe her then. She's 4 years old with blonde curls and blue eyes. She has a small birthmark shaped like a crescent moon behind her right ear. Sarah's voice trembled. She was wearing a blue dress with white pinafore when I last saw her. Archer nodded. Distinctive enough. What about your homestead? Is there anything there that might give us clues about who took her? I didn't see anyone, but I wasn't looking for tracks. I was too, Sarah trailed off, remembering the blind panic that had seized her. We'll ride out at first light tomorrow to check. Archer's eyes softened slightly. For tonight, you should rest. Rest? Sarah laughed bitterly. How can I rest when my daughter is out there, scared and alone? Because you'll be no good to her if you collapse from exhaustion, Archer said firmly, and because whoever took her clearly wants her alive, or they wouldn't have bothered taking her at all. The harsh logic of his words provided little comfort, but Sarah knew he was right. One more thing, Archer said, his voice dropping lower. Did you bring any weapons with you? My husband's revolver. I know how to use it. Approval flickered in his eyes. Good. Keep it close tonight. If Sutton has people in this town, word might spread that you're looking for him. The reality of her situation hit Sarah anew. You think I'm in danger? I think caution is warranted. Archer stood. I'll see you safely back to the hotel. Lock your door and don't open it for anyone but me in the morning. As they walked across the muddy street, Sarah glanced at the tall man beside her. Why are you really doing this, Archer? And don't tell me it's just because someone once helped you. Archer was silent for several steps. 5 years ago, I was tracking a man who'd stolen money from a railroad company. When I caught up to him, I discovered he'd used the money to save his daughter from an orphanage where children were being mistreated. He paused. Company policy said to bring him in anyway. I let him go instead. Lost my position with the Pinkertons over it. You don't regret it, Sarah observed. Never. Some things matter more than rules or money. Archer looked down at her. Get some sleep, Mrs. Ainsworth. Tomorrow we start finding answers. At her hotel door, Sarah turned to him. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there today. A shadow of a smile touched his lips. You strike me as a survivor, Mrs. Ainsworth. You'd have found a way. With that, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Sarah to face a long, sleepless night, wondering if her daughter was warm, safe, and not too frightened without her mother. True to his word, Archer knocked on Sarah's door at dawn. She opened it immediately, having been awake for hours. She'd changed into the practical riding clothes she'd purchased, a simple skirt and blouse with a sturdy jacket, and had her husband's revolver tucked into a pocket. You look ready, Archer commented, noting her determined expression. I am. Sarah had spent the night channeling her fear into resolve. What's our plan? First, we ride to your homestead to look for tracks or any evidence the kidnappers left behind. Then we'll visit the nearest stagecoach stop and railway station to ask if anyone matching Emma's description passed through. On their way out of town, they stopped at the livery where Archer had a strong buckskin gelding stabled. Sarah's aging mare looked pitiful beside it. "Your horse won't make the journey back and forth at the pace we need," Archer observed. He spoke briefly with the stable owner, then returned leading a sturdy roan mare. "This one's for rent. She's steady and has good stamina." Sarah started to protest about the cost, but Archer shook his head. "Arguments waste time, Mrs. Ainsworth, and time is something your daughter doesn't have." The ride to Sarah's homestead took them through rugged country, across streams swollen from the recent rain, and through stands of pine that grew denser as they traveled north. Archer rode slightly ahead, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Were you really a Pinkerton?" Sarah asked as they forded a shallow creek. "For 8 years. Archer guided his horse up the muddy bank, learned tracking from my father before that. He was a scout for the army. And now? Now I take odd jobs, guiding, hunting, occasional security work when the mines ship gold." He glanced back at her. "Being unattached has its advantages." "And disadvantages," Sarah added quietly, thinking of the loneliness she'd sometimes felt on her isolated homestead, with only Emma for company. True enough, something in his tone suggested he understood all too well. When they crested the final ridge overlooking Sarah's small valley, Archer held up a hand to stop her. He studied the cabin and surrounding area carefully. "Smoke," he said. "Someone's there." Sarah's heart leaped. "Emma!" "Stay behind me," Archer said, drawing his pistol. "Could be the kidnappers returned, or someone else taking advantage of an empty cabin." They approached cautiously, keeping to the tree line. Archer dismounted and motioned for Sarah to do the same. They tied their horses and proceeded on foot until they had a clear view of the cabin. A man sat on the front porch, casually smoking a pipe. "Do you know him?" Archer whispered. Sarah shook her head, her hand going to her revolver. "Stay here," Archer instructed. "If things go badly, ride for town." Before she could protest, he emerged from the trees, approaching the cabin with his pistol ready but not aimed directly at the stranger. "Afternoon," Archer called. "Mind telling me what you're doing at Mrs. Ainsworth's property?" The man stood slowly, seemingly unsurprised. He was well dressed in a city suit that looked out of place in the wilderness. "I was wondering when she'd return, or send someone." His eyes shifted to the trees where Sarah was hidden. "You might as well come out, Mrs. Abernathy, or do you prefer Ainsworth now?" Sarah's blood ran cold at the use of her former name. She stepped out from the trees, her revolver drawn. "Where is my daughter?" The man smiled thinly. "Safe for now. Mr. Sutton was quite displeased to learn you disappeared with his ward." "His ward?" Sarah's voice rose. "Emma is my daughter." "A technicality that the courts have already remedied in Mr. Sutton's favor, I assure you." The man brushed invisible dust from his sleeve. "I'm Mr. Reed, Mr. Sutton's attorney. I'm here to deliver a proposition." Archer kept his pistol trained on Reed. "Let's hear it then." "It's simple. Mrs. Abernathy signs a few documents confirming Mr. Sutton's legal guardianship of Emma and renouncing any claim to her late husband's estate, and in return, she gets to say goodbye to her daughter before returning to whatever life she's made for herself here." "And if I refuse?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Reed's smile turned cold. "Then you never see Emma again, and Mr. Sutton files kidnapping charges against you for taking her across state lines last year. Your new identity won't protect you from that." Archer took a step closer to Reed. "Where's the girl now?" "Safe in Mr. Sutton's care in Fort Collins. He's prepared to bring her here for the exchange, provided Mrs. Abernathy agrees to the terms." Sarah's mind raced. The thought of legally surrendering Emma was unbearable, but she needed to see her daughter to confirm she was safe. She looked at Archer, silently pleading for guidance. Archer's expression gave nothing away. "What guarantee do we have that Sutton will bring the child once she signs?" "Mr. Sutton is a businessman," Reed replied smoothly. "He understands the value of completed transactions. The girl will be here." "When?" Sarah demanded. 3 days. Mr. Sutton will meet you here with Emma and the papers. Come alone or the deal is void. Reed's eyes shifted to Archer. That means without your hired gun, Mrs. Abernathy. Archer stepped closer to Reed, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. And what's to stop me from convincing you to tell us exactly where the girl is right now? Reed appeared unfazed. Because Mr. Sutton anticipated such barbarism. If I don't return by nightfall, his instructions regarding the child become less favorable. Sarah felt sick. You're using my daughter as leverage. I prefer to think of it as insurance for a civil negotiation. Reed tipped his hat. 3 days, Mrs. Abernathy, alone. With that, he walked to a horse tethered behind the cabin and mounted smoothly, riding away without looking back. As soon as he was out of sight, Sarah's legs gave way. She sank to the ground, the revolver falling from her trembling hand. He has Emma. Sutton has my baby. Archer knelt beside her. He doesn't have her yet. Sarah looked up at him in confusion. What do you mean? His attorney was just here delivering terms. Exactly. Sutton sent his attorney, not some hired muscle. That tells me 2 things. Archer helped her to her feet. First, he's trying to make this look legitimate, a legal guardian reclaiming his ward, not a kidnapping. Second, Emma isn't in Fort Collins yet. Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. How can you know that? Because Reed said Sutton would bring her here in 3 days. If she were already with him, why wait? No, they're bringing her to him now, which gives us a chance to intercept them before they reach Fort Collins. Sarah grabbed his arm. Then we need to go now. We could catch them on the road. Not so fast. Archer surveyed the area. First, we need to know exactly who we're dealing with. Let's check the cabin for clues about who took Emma and which way they went. The inside of the cabin was in disarray. Drawers had been emptied, a small trunk upended. Sarah's few books had been thrown to the floor, and Emma's bed had been stripped of its blankets. They were looking for something specific, Archer noted, examining the systematic nature of the search. Sarah went to a loose floorboard near the hearth and pried it up. Beneath it was a small leather pouch. They didn't find this, she said, relief evident in her voice. It's all the money I have left, about $40. Archer nodded. That might prove useful. He moved to the doorway. Let's check for tracks outside. The recent rain made tracking easier. Archer found clear impressions of boots and smaller footprints that could only be Emma's near the swing. 2 men, he said, crouching to examine the depth of the prints, one heavier than the other, and they didn't carry her away, she walked with them. She wouldn't go willingly with strangers, Sarah said, frowning. Archer pointed to a spot where the grass was crushed. They might have convinced her they knew you, or that you had sent them. Smart kidnappers avoid struggling children who draw attention. He followed the tracks to where 2 horses and a smaller pony had been tied behind a stand of pines. They came prepared with a mount for her. That confirms this was planned, not opportunistic. Sarah felt sick at how methodically her daughter had been taken. The tracks lead south, Archer continued, mounting his horse, toward the main road that eventually connects to the Denver stage route. So they are taking her to Fort Collins, Sarah said, her voice tight with fear. Eventually. But they've got at least a day's head start on us. Archer's eyes narrowed as he studied the horizon. There's a shorter route through Carson Pass, but it's rough country, dangerous. I don't care about dangerous, Sarah said fiercely. I care about reaching Emma before they get her to Sutton. Archer studied her for a moment, then nodded. Pack whatever you need from the cabin. We ride within the hour. As Sarah gathered supplies, Archer made a careful sketch of the cabin and surrounding area, noting the positions of tracks and other evidence. When she questioned him, he explained, If we fail to intercept them, we may need to prove kidnapping to a judge. Details matter. An hour later, they were riding hard toward Carson Pass, a shortcut that would potentially put them ahead of the kidnappers before they reached Fort Collins. The terrain grew increasingly difficult as they climbed into higher elevations. How did you learn to track so well? Sarah asked during a brief stop to rest the horses. Archer checked his saddle cinch before answering. My father was half Cherokee. He could read sign that most white men would walk right past. A faint smile crossed his face. He used to say tracking people was just a matter of seeing what they tried to hide. And what are these men trying to hide? That they're in a hurry. Archer mounted his buckskin. Their tracks show they're pushing harder than they should with a child along. That means they're on a schedule, probably trying to reach a rendezvous point. They rode until dusk, making camp in a sheltered ravine. Archer built a small fire, careful to keep the flames low to avoid detection. Sarah was exhausted, but too anxious to sleep. "Try to rest," Archer advised, handing her a cup of coffee from the small pot he'd set over the fire. "Tomorrow will be harder terrain." "I keep thinking about Emma," Sarah admitted. "Whether she's scared or cold or crying for me." Archer's expression softened. "Children are more resilient than we give them credit for, and these men need her unharmed for Sutton's plan to work." "What kind of man steals another man's company and then takes his child?" Sarah asked bitterly. "The kind who's never faced consequences," Archer replied. "Tell me about your husband. How did he die?" Sarah stared into the fire. "They said it was an accident at the mine, a cave-in, but William had been arguing with Sutton the day before about financial discrepancies he'd discovered." "You think Sutton had him killed?" It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded anyway. "I could never prove it, and after William's death, Sutton moved quickly to seize everything, presenting papers that supposedly showed William had signed over his shares as collateral for loans." "Forgeries?" "Almost certainly, but Sutton had the judge, the bank, and the town council all in his pocket. I was just a widow with a 3-year-old daughter." Sarah's voice hardened. "When I started asking questions, Sutton began spreading rumors that I was unstable with grief, unfit to care for Emma. That's when I knew I had to leave." Archer was silent for a moment. "Did you have any allies in town? Anyone who might have helped you?" "The family attorney, Mr. Berkshire. He helped me secure new papers and establish my identity as Sarah Ainsworth. He was the only one I trusted. We should locate him when this is over. His testimony about the forgeries could help build a case against Sutton." Sarah laughed sadly. "If we manage to get Emma back, my only plan is to take her and run much farther than Montana." "Running isn't always the answer," Archer said quietly. "Sometimes you have to stand and fight." "Says the man who left the Pinkertons and drifts from town to town," Sarah countered. A brief smile touched his lips. "Fair point. But I wasn't running from anything, just looking for something I hadn't found yet." "And what's that?" Archer's blue eyes met hers across the fire. "A reason to stay in one place." The intensity of his gaze made Sarah look away, suddenly conscious of how alone they were in the wilderness. "We should sleep," she said, breaking the moment. "As you said, tomorrow will be harder." Archer nodded and moved to the opposite side of the fire. "I'll take first watch. I'll wake you in a few hours." Sarah wrapped herself in her blanket, her thoughts still on Emma, but now also on the enigmatic man who had volunteered to help her when no one else would. She wondered what ghosts he carried that made him understand her desperation so well. She fell asleep watching him stare into the darkness, his profile sharp against the dying firelight, a solitary figure who seemed both part of this wild land and somehow separate from it. The next morning dawned clear and cold. They broke camp before sunrise and continued their journey through Carson Pass, a treacherous route through rocky terrain that cut nearly a day off the journey to the main road to Fort Collins. By midday, they had reached the highest point of the pass and stopped to rest the horses. From their vantage point, they could see for miles across valleys and pine-covered slopes. "There," Archer pointed to a distant plume of dust on a road far below. "Riders, moving fast." Sarah squinted against the sunlight. "Is it them?" "Can't tell from here. But that's the road from Redemption Creek to the Denver stage route." Archer calculated distances in his mind. "If we push hard, we could intercept them before nightfall." They descended as quickly as safety allowed, the horses picking their way down steep, rocky trails. Sarah's muscles ached from 2 days of hard riding, but she ignored the pain, focused entirely on reaching Emma. Late in the afternoon, they emerged from the pass onto flatter ground. Archer held up his hand for a halt and dismounted to study the ground. "Fresh tracks," he said. "3 horses, one smaller than the others. They passed here less than 2 hours ago." Hope surged through Sarah. "We're gaining on them. They'll be stopping soon to make camp." Archer remounted. "We need to be careful now. Surprising armed men with a hostage is dangerous." They rode more cautiously as evening approached, following the tracks until Archer spotted smoke from a campfire in a grove of cottonwoods near a small stream. They dismounted and secured their horses, then crept forward on foot until they could see the camp. 2 men sat by a fire, and beside them, huddled in a blanket, was a small blonde child. "Emma," Sarah whispered, her heart leaping at the sight of her daughter. Archer put a restraining hand on her arm. "We need a plan. There are 2 of them, both armed." Sarah studied the men. One was large and bearded, the other smaller with a thin face. Neither looked familiar to her. "I don't recognize them. They must be hired men." "Which makes this simpler," Archer said. "Hired men care about money, not Sutton's vendetta." "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her hand going to her revolver. "Wait until they're settled for the night. One will sleep while the other keeps watch. I'll take out the watchman silently, then we'll have the advantage when the other wakes." The wait was excruciating. Sarah watched as the men fed Emma a meager dinner and then made her lie down on a bedroll. The child looked unharmed but subdued, her usual vivacity absent. When darkness fell completely, the larger man settled down to sleep while the thinner one took the first watch, sitting with a rifle across his knees. "Stay here," Archer whispered. "When I signal, come forward. But keep your gun ready." He disappeared into the darkness so silently, Sarah could scarcely believe he'd been beside her a moment before. She waited, heart pounding, watching the camp. Several minutes passed. The watchman yawned, shifting his position. Suddenly, a dark shape materialized behind him. Before the man could react, Archer had one arm around his throat and the other clamping his mouth shut. There was a brief struggle before the man went limp. Archer lowered him to the ground, then waved Sarah forward. She crept toward the camp, revolver drawn. When she reached the fire, Archer was already binding the unconscious man's hands with rope from their saddlebags. The commotion woke the second kidnapper. He started to rise, reaching for his gun, but froze when he found himself staring down the barrel of Sarah's revolver. "Don't move," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What the man began. "Hands where I can see them," Archer commanded, his own pistol now drawn. "Nice and slow." The kidnapper complied, raising his hands. "We're just doing a job, mister. No need for trouble." "Kidnapping a child is trouble enough," Sarah said coldly. She glanced toward Emma, who had woken and was staring wide-eyed at the scene. "Emma, sweetheart, it's Mama." "Mama!" the child cried, scrambling to her feet and running to Sarah. Sarah dropped to one knee, keeping her gun trained on the kidnapper while embracing her daughter with one arm. "Are you hurt, baby?" Emma shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "They said you sent them to take me to a special place, but I knew you wouldn't." "No, I wouldn't," Sarah assured her, kissing her forehead. "You're safe now." Archer had the bearded kidnapper tie himself to a tree, while the other man remained unconscious. He searched both men, finding a folded paper in the bearded man's coat. "Instructions," he said, scanning the document. "They were to deliver Emma to a man named Hargrove at the Crawford Junction stage stop tomorrow at noon. Hargrove would then take her to Fort Collins." "That matches what Reed told us," Sarah said, still holding Emma close. Archer nodded. "Now we have proof of the kidnapping." He turned to the bound man. "Who hired you?" "Don't know his name," the man growled. "We got our instructions and half our payment from a lawyer type in Denver. Rest was coming after delivery." "Reed," Sarah confirmed. "How much were you paid to steal a child from her mother?" Archer asked, his voice dangerously soft. The man had the decency to look uncomfortable. $100 each. Look, we were told the kid belonged with her guardian, that her mother had taken her illegally." "And you believed that?" Sarah asked bitterly. The man shrugged as best he could while bound. "Wasn't my business to question it. Job's a job." Archer's expression hardened. "Well, your job is finished. You'll be staying here until the sheriff from the next town can collect you." "You can't just leave us tied up in the wilderness," the man protested. "I can and will," Archer replied calmly. "You're lucky I don't do worse, considering what you've done." Sarah gathered Emma's few belongings while Archer secured both kidnappers. The child clung to her mother, unwilling to let go even for a moment. "We need to move away from here for the night," Archer said when he'd finished. "They could have accomplices following." They made a new camp several miles away, in a well-hidden ravine. Emma, exhausted by her ordeal, fell asleep almost immediately in Sarah's arms. Sarah stroked her daughter's blonde curls, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered to Archer, who sat across the small fire they'd built. "I would never have found her without your help." Archer shook his head. "You'd have found a way. A mother protecting her child is a force few men would want to reckon with. Still, you risked your life for strangers." "Not strangers anymore," he said quietly. Sarah studied him in the firelight, seeing beyond the tough exterior to the man beneath a man with his own code of honor that transcended conventional law. "What happens now?" "Now we have evidence of kidnapping. The note from Reed, the instructions found on the kidnappers, even the men themselves once the sheriff picks them up. We take it to a judge not in Fort Collins where Sutton has influence, but somewhere else." "Will it be enough?" Sarah asked. "To keep Emma with you, yes. To bring down Sutton for everything he's done." Archer's expression grew troubled. "That would require more proof about your husband's death and the forged documents." Sarah looked down at her sleeping daughter. "I don't care about revenge or justice anymore. I just want to keep Emma safe." "Which means dealing with Sutton permanently," Archer pointed out. "Otherwise, you'll never stop running." The truth of his words settled heavily on Sarah. "What do you suggest?" "First, we get Emma somewhere safe. Then we gather more evidence against Sutton enough to ensure he can never threaten you again." "That could take months," Sarah protested. Archer's eyes met hers. "Do you have somewhere else to be?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah realized with a start that beyond keeping Emma safe, she had no plans, no future mapped out, just the desperate need to escape. "No," she admitted, "but I can't ask you to dedicate months of your life to our problems." A faint smile touched Archer's lips. "You haven't asked. I'm offering." Sarah wanted to question why this man she'd known for just 2 days would commit himself to her cause, but exhaustion was overtaking her. And the relief of having Emma back in her arms was overwhelming. Questions could wait until morning. "We should sleep," she said instead. "Tomorrow we need to decide where to go." Archer nodded. "I'll keep watch first. Rest now." Sarah curled around Emma, protective even in sleep, and allowed herself to relax for the first time since finding her daughter missing. Her last thought before drifting off was that despite the dangers still ahead, she no longer felt alone in facing them. Morning brought clarity and new resolve. Over a simple breakfast, Sarah and Archer discussed their next steps while Emma, seemingly recovered from her ordeal, explored the area around their camp under her mother's watchful eye. "We need to send word to the nearest sheriff about the kidnappers," Archer said. "Then head somewhere Sutton won't expect to find you." Sarah nodded. "But where? He found us in Montana easily enough. I have a friend who owns a ranch near Laramie, Wyoming territory. Nathan Sullivan, we rode together for the Pinkertons. He'd give you sanctuary while we build a case against Sutton." "Wyoming," Sarah repeated, considering it. "That's still close enough to gather evidence, but far enough to be safe." "Exactly." Archer watched Emma chasing a butterfly. "Sullivan has a wife and children. Emma would have playmates and you'd have support." The thought of not being completely alone was appealing. "How soon can we leave?" "Today. We'll send a message to the sheriff from the next town, then head northeast toward Laramie." They broke camp efficiently and set out. Emma rode double with Sarah on the roan mare, chattering about butterflies and clouds, her resilience astonishing. By midday, they had reached a small settlement where Archer dispatched a message to the nearest sheriff about the location of the kidnappers. As they continued their journey toward Wyoming, Sarah noticed Archer was quieter than usual, his gaze frequently scanning the horizon. "What is it?" she asked when they stopped to water the horses. "We're being followed," he said quietly, not wanting to alarm Emma. "Single rider keeping his distance. Been there since we left the settlement." Sarah's hand instinctively tightened around Emma. "Sutton's man?" "Possibly, or it could be someone else entirely." Archer adjusted his saddle. "Either way, we need to lose him before reaching Sullivan's ranch." They changed course, heading into rougher terrain where their pursuer would have difficulty following discreetly. By evening, Archer confirmed they were alone again, and they made camp in a protected hollow. After Emma fell asleep, Sarah and Archer sat by the fire, speaking in low voices. "Do you think Sutton will come after us himself?" Sarah asked. "Men like Sutton rarely do their own dirty work," Archer replied, "but he won't give up easily, especially now that we've taken Emma back and have evidence against him. I've been thinking about what you said about needing to stop running and face him." Sarah stared into the fire. "You're right. Emma deserves a stable life, not one spent looking over our shoulders." "Building a case will take time," Archer warned, "and there's risk involved in gathering evidence." "I understand." Sarah looked up at him. "But I'm tired of being afraid, Archer. I want my name back, my real name. I want Emma to be proud of who she is, not hidden away under false identities." Something like admiration flickered in Archer's eyes. "Then that's what we'll do." The journey to Wyoming took 4 days. They traveled cautiously, avoiding main roads and settlements where possible. Emma quickly grew attached to Archer, pestering him with questions about animals they saw and begging for stories around the campfire each night. Sarah watched their interaction with mixed emotions. It was good for Emma to have a male figure to trust after the trauma of the kidnapping, but she worried about what would happen when Archer eventually left. Men like him didn't settle down with ready-made families. On the 4th day, they crested a hill and saw below them a sprawling ranch nestled in a green valley. Smoke rose from the chimney of a large cabin, and in the distance, cattle grazed on rolling grassland. "Sullivan's place," Archer said with satisfaction. "We made it." They rode down to the ranch, where they were greeted by Nathan Sullivan himself, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and a ready smile. He welcomed them warmly, especially once Archer explained their situation. "Any friend of Archer's is welcome here," Sullivan assured Sarah. "My wife Rebecca will be delighted to have another woman around, and our children will be thrilled to have a new playmate." True to his word, Rebecca Sullivan embraced Sarah and Emma as if they were long-lost family. Their 3 children, aged 6, 8, and 10, immediately whisked Emma away to show her the new kittens in the barn. That evening, after a hearty dinner, the adults sat around the fireplace discussing Sarah's situation. Nathan listened gravely as Archer outlined the evidence they had and what they still needed to build a case against Sutton. "This won't be easy," Nathan cautioned. "Men with money and influence can make problems disappear." "Which is why we need irrefutable proof," Archer replied. "Witness testimony about the forged documents, evidence of financial manipulation, perhaps even something connecting him to William Abernathy's death." Sarah shuddered. "You're talking about proving murder." "If that's what happened, yes," Archer said quietly. "But even without that, we can establish fraud and kidnapping, which would be enough to secure your safety and possibly recover some of your husband's assets for Emma." Nathan leaned forward. "I still have contacts in the Pinkerton agency. I can make discreet inquiries about Sutton's business dealings." "And I can return to Colorado to find your family attorney, Berkshire," Archer added. "His testimony about the forgeries would be crucial." "You're going back?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the alarm in her voice. Archer nodded. "It's the fastest way to gather what we need. And Sutton doesn't know me. I can move more freely than you could." "When will you leave?" The question came out smaller than she intended. "Tomorrow. The sooner we start, the sooner this ends." His eyes held hers steadily. "Emma will be safe here with you. Sullivan's ranch is well protected, and few know of your connection to me." Sarah wanted to protest, but knew he was right. Still, the thought of him riding into danger on her behalf filled her with dread. Later, after Emma had been tucked into bed in the room they would share, Sarah found Archer on the porch, smoking a cigarette and gazing at the stars. "I never thanked you properly," she said, joining him at the railing. "No need." "There is every need." Sarah turned to face him. "You've risked your life for us, and now you're going back into danger. Why?" Archer was silent for a long moment, the ember of his cigarette glowing in the darkness. "Some injustices can't be ignored," he finally said. "What Sutton did to you and Emma, it's not right, and I'm in a position to help." "Is that all?" Sarah asked softly. His eyes met hers. Something unspoken passing between them. "No," he admitted. "That's not all." The air seemed to thicken around them. Archer carefully extinguished his cigarette and turned to face her fully. "I've drifted most of my adult life, Sarah, taking jobs, moving on, never staying anywhere long enough to form attachments." He paused. "The past few days with you and Emma, it's reminded me of what it feels like to have purpose beyond the next paycheck." Sarah's heart beat faster. "We're grateful for your help." "It's not about gratitude," he interrupted gently. "It's about finding something worth fighting for, something worth staying for." The implication of his words hung in the night air between them. Sarah had not allowed herself to think beyond survival since William's death, had not considered that she might find connection with another man. Yet here was Archer, offering not just his help but the possibility of something more. "I hardly know you," she whispered. A faint smile touched his lips. "You know the important parts. The rest comes with time. Time we may not have if Sutton has his way. Then we make sure he doesn't." Archer's expression grew serious. "I'll return as soon as I can, Sarah, with enough evidence to end this threat permanently." "Be careful," she said, surprising herself by reaching out to touch his arm. Emma would be devastated if anything happened to her hero. "Just Emma?" he asked, his voice lower. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "No, not just Emma." He covered her hand with his own. "That's reason enough to come back." The moment stretched between them, fragile and new. Then Archer stepped back, breaking the spell. "I should rest. It's a long ride tomorrow." He tipped his hat slightly. "Good night, Sarah." She watched him walk away, aware that something had shifted between them, something that frightened and exhilarated her in equal measure. "Good night, Archer," she whispered to his retreating back. Archer departed at dawn the next morning. Emma cried when she realized he was leaving, clinging to his leg until he knelt to her level and promised solemnly that he would return. Sarah stood on the porch, maintaining her composure for Emma's sake, but her heart felt leaden as she watched him ride away. Life at the Sullivan Ranch soon settled into a comfortable routine. Rebecca Sullivan proved to be not just a gracious hostess, but a true friend. The women bonded over cooking and sewing, and Rebecca never pressed when Sarah fell silent, lost in worry about Archer or fears about Sutton. Emma flourished with the Sullivan children, regaining her natural exuberance after the trauma of the kidnapping. She helped collect eggs each morning and delighted in learning to ride a gentle pony Nathan provided. 2 weeks passed with no word from Archer. Sarah tried not to worry, knowing the journey to Colorado took time, and the gathering evidence would not be quick work. Still, each day that passed without news made sleep more elusive. On the 17th day, a rider approached the ranch. Sarah was hanging laundry when she spotted the dust cloud on the horizon, and her heart leapt with hope that it might be Archer. As the rider drew closer, however, she saw it was a young man in a courier's uniform. Nathan met him in the yard and received a telegram, paying the courier before sending him on his way. "It's from Archer," Nathan said, handing Sarah the paper. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Found Berkshire. Stop, he has documents proving fraud. Stop returning with him in 3 days. Stop all well, stop Archer. Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by renewed anxiety. If Archer had found concrete evidence against Sutton, they were one step closer to justice, but also in greater danger. "This is good news," Nathan assured her, seeing her expression. "With Berkshire's testimony and whatever documents he's preserved, you'll have a strong case." Sarah nodded, tucking the telegram into her pocket. "I just hope they make it back safely. Sutton won't give up without a fight." The next 3 days crawled by. Sarah found herself constantly watching the road, startling at every distant sound. Emma, sensing her mother's tension, became clingy, wanting to sleep in Sarah's arms rather than in her own bed. On the morning of the 4th day after the telegram, Sarah was helping Rebecca bake bread when they heard hoofbeats approaching. Both women rushed to the window. 2 riders were coming up the road to the ranch. Sarah recognized Archer's broad-shouldered figure immediately, a wave of relief washing over her. The second rider was older, his posture more formal, even on horseback. "It's them," she breathed, wiping flour from her hands and hurrying outside. Emma, playing in the yard, saw them too and let out a squeal of delight. "Archer's back!" she shouted, running toward the approaching horses. Sarah caught her daughter before she could dash directly into the path of the horses. "Wait, sweetheart, let them stop first." Archer dismounted with a fluid grace that belied the weariness evident in his face. His eyes found Sarah's immediately, a silent communication passing between them, before Emma broke free and launched herself at him. He caught her with a surprised laugh, swinging her up into his arms. "I promised I'd come back, didn't I?" "You took too long," Emma informed him seriously. "My apologies, Miss Emma," he replied with equal seriousness. "I had important business for your mother." He set Emma down and turned to introduce the older man who had dismounted beside him. "Sarah, this is Harold Berkshire, your husband's attorney. Mr. Berkshire, Mrs. Sarah Abernathy." The attorney bowed slightly. "Mrs. Abernathy, I cannot express how relieved I am to find you well. After your disappearance, I feared the worst." "Mr. Berkshire was keeping your husband's real documents safe," Archer explained. "He's been gathering evidence against Sutton since William's death." Sarah shook the attorney's hand warmly. "Thank you for your loyalty, Mr. Berkshire. Please come inside. You both must be exhausted." Over dinner that evening, Berkshire explained what he had discovered. "Mr. Sutton began manipulating the company books months before your husband's death," he told Sarah. "I suspected something was amiss when William asked me to review certain transactions, but I had no proof until after the accident." "You believe it wasn't an accident?" Sarah said quietly. Berkshire's expression was grave. "I have a sworn statement from a miner who was present that day. He claims to have seen Sutton's foreman tampering with the supports in the section where William was inspecting." Archer leaned forward. "And the forged documents?" "I have the originals of William's actual will and business agreements," Berkshire replied. "They clearly contradict what Sutton presented to the court. Additionally, I've traced the paper and ink used in Sutton's forgeries to a specific supplier who can testify that Sutton purchased these materials just days before William's death." "Is it enough?" Sarah asked. "Enough to bring charges against him?" "With the kidnapping evidence as well, yes." Berkshire nodded confidently. "I've already spoken with a federal marshal in Denver who has agreed to review the case. He has no connections to Sutton and has a reputation for incorruptibility." Relief washed over Sarah. "So it's almost over." "Not quite," Archer cautioned. "We still need to formally present all this evidence to the marshal, and Sutton may learn what we're doing before we can complete the process." "Which means we remain at risk," Sarah concluded. Nathan, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "You're safe here for now, but I agree with Archer. We should remain vigilant until Sutton is in custody." The adults continued discussing strategy late into the night after Emma had been put to bed. Eventually, they decided that Berkshire would travel to Denver the following day to meet with the federal marshal, while Archer remained at the ranch to protect Sarah and Emma in case Sutton made a move against them. When the others had retired, Sarah found herself alone with Archer on the porch, much as they had been the night before his departure. The air between them felt charged with unspoken words. "Thank you for finding Mr. Berkshire," she said finally, breaking the silence. "I never expected to have such concrete evidence against Sutton." Berkshire did most of the work, Archer replied. He's been building this case for over a year, waiting for the right moment. Our arrival just gave him the push he needed. Sarah studied Archer's profile in the moonlight. You look tired. A faint smile touched his lips. It was a long journey. Was it dangerous? She asked softly. At times. He turned to face her. Sutton's men were watching Berkshire. We had to be careful smuggling out the documents. The thought of him in danger on her behalf made Sarah's chest tighten. I worried about you. Did you? His voice was gentle, almost tentative. Every day. The admission came easily in the darkness. Emma asked about you constantly. She's quite taken with her rescuer. And her mother? Archer asked quietly. Sarah's heart beat faster. Her mother is grateful. Just grateful? He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. No, she whispered, not just grateful. Archer reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The simple touch sent a shiver through her. I thought about you every day, he confessed, about both of you. About what it might be like to have a home to return to, instead of just another town. We're not your responsibility, Archer. That's not what I'm saying. His eyes held hers intently. I'm saying that after years of drifting, I've found something I don't want to walk away from. The honesty in his voice made tears prick at Sarah's eyes. You hardly know me. I know enough. His thumb gently brushed her cheek. I know you're brave and fierce when it comes to protecting your daughter. I know you've endured loss and betrayal without letting it break your spirit. I know that when you smile, really smile, it lights up everything around you. Archer, Sarah's voice faltered. I'm not asking for promises, Sarah. I know it's too soon and you have Emma to think about. He dropped his hand reluctantly. I just wanted you to know where I stand before this is all over. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. Multiple riders, moving fast. Archer tensed immediately, hand going to his pistol. Get inside, he ordered, all softness gone from his voice. Wake Nathan and get Emma, now. Sarah didn't question him, rushing into the house to alert the others. By the time she had gathered a sleepy, confused Emma and joined Rebecca with her children in the main room, Nathan and Archer were both armed and at the windows. 6 riders, Nathan reported grimly, armed. Sutton's men? Sarah asked, clutching Emma to her. Archer nodded. Most likely. Someone must have followed Berkshire and me from Colorado. The riders surrounded the house, their leader calling out, Come out, Mrs. Abernathy. We know you're in there with your daughter and that meddling lawyer. Nathan glanced at Archer. They don't know Berkshire left this morning for Denver. That gives us an advantage, Archer agreed. He turned to Sarah. Is there a cellar or somewhere secure you can hide with the children? Rebecca answered. The root cellar. It's accessible through the kitchen floor. Go, Nathan urged his wife. Take the children and stay quiet. As Rebecca gathered her children, Sarah set Emma down and knelt to her level. Sweetheart, you need to go with Mrs. Sullivan. It's like a game of hide and seek, but you must be very quiet. Emma's eyes were wide with fear. Are the bad men back? Yes, but Archer and Mr. Sullivan won't let them hurt you. Sarah hugged her tightly. I need you to be brave, like you were before. Aren't you coming? Emma clutched at her mother's dress. Sarah looked at Archer, a silent question in her eyes. Go with them, he said. We'll handle this. But Sarah shook her head. No, I'm tired of hiding from Sutton and his men. She turned back to Emma. Mama needs to help stop the bad men, sweetheart. I'll come get you as soon as it's safe. After a tearful goodbye, Rebecca led the children to the root cellar. Once they were safely hidden, Sarah retrieved her revolver from her room and rejoined the men. You should be with Emma, Archer said, though his tone suggested he'd expected her decision. This ends tonight, Sarah replied firmly, one way or another. Outside, the leader of the group called again. You have until the count of 10 to send out Mrs. Abernathy and her daughter, or we're coming and shooting. Nathan positioned himself at one window, Archer at another, while Sarah took cover behind a heavy oak table they'd overturned. They'll try to set fire to the house if we don't respond, Nathan said grimly. Archer nodded. We need to draw them in closer, separate them if possible. What if I spoke to them? Sarah suggested. Distracted them while you two got into position outside. Too dangerous, Archer immediately objected. They won't shoot me, they need me alive to sign those papers for Sutton. Sarah's face was set with determination. I could buy you time. Before either man could argue further, gunfire erupted, shattering a window. Glass sprayed across the room as bullets thudded into the walls. Get down! Archer shouted, returning fire through the broken window. The exchange of gunfire continued for several minutes, neither side gaining advantage. Then, a flaming torch arced through the air, landing on the porch with a shower of sparks. They're trying to smoke us out, Nathan said, shooting at a shadow moving between the barn and the house. Sarah crawled to another window, staying low. Through it, she could see two men approaching with more torches, preparing to set the house ablaze. Without hesitation, she took aim and fired, hitting one man in the shoulder. He dropped his torch with a cry of pain. The second man dove for cover, his torch falling harmlessly into the dirt. Good shot, Archer said, a note of admiration in his voice. William taught me to shoot, Sarah replied, reloading her revolver. He said a woman alone on the frontier needed to defend herself. Wise man, Nathan commented, firing again through his window. A shout from outside drew their attention. Abernathy, Sutton wants you alive, but he didn't say anything about your friends. Send out the girl, and maybe we'll let the others live. Sarah's face hardened. He's lying. They'll kill all of us once they have Emma. They're not getting near Emma, Archer promised. His eyes met Sarah's across the room, a silent communication passing between them. I have an idea, but it's risky. Tell me, she urged. There's a trap door to the roof in the back bedroom, Nathan supplied, understanding Archer's thinking. If one of us could get up there, we'd have the high ground. I'll go, Archer said. Nathan, keep them focused on the front. Sarah, watch the back in case they try to circle around. As Archer moved toward the bedroom, Sarah caught his arm. Be careful. He covered her hand with his, a brief, warm pressure. Always. Minutes later, they heard movement on the roof. Then, shots rang out from above, followed by cries of surprise and pain from Sutton's men. Archer had successfully flanked them. The distraction allowed Nathan to pick off another man trying to approach from the side while Sarah kept watch on the back door. The tide turned quickly. With their ambush failed and 3 men down, the remaining attackers began to retreat toward their horses. They're running, Nathan called. Just then, Sarah heard a noise at the back door, a subtle scratching at the lock. Someone was trying to break in while the others retreated. She aimed her revolver at the door. Hands steady despite her racing heart. The door burst open, and a man rushed in, gun raised. Sarah fired without hesitation, hitting him in the chest. He staggered, fired wildly, and collapsed. Pain exploded in Sarah's left arm. She looked down to see blood spreading across her sleeve where the man's bullet had grazed her. Sarah! Archer's voice called from outside. He appeared in the doorway moments later, taking in the fallen attacker and Sarah's bloodied arm in one glance. You're hurt. It's just a graze, she assured him, though the wound burned fiercely. Archer quickly checked that the attacker was no longer a threat, then turned his full attention to Sarah. He tore a strip from his shirt to bind her arm, his touch gentle despite the urgency of the situation. The others? She asked as he worked. 2 dead? 2 wounded and captured. The last one got away. Archer finished tying off the bandage. Nathan securing the wounded ones in the barn. Emma is safe. I checked the cellar hatch. Rebecca has them all quiet down there. Relief washed over Sarah, making her knees weak. Archer steadied her with a hand on her good arm. It's over, he said softly. You're safe now. Sarah leaned against him, suddenly exhausted. Not until Sutton is behind bars. We have his men, Sarah, and Berkshire is already on his way to Denver with the evidence. Sutton's days of freedom are numbered. She looked up at him, finding strength in his certainty. Promise me. I promise. He held her gaze. I won't let him hurt you or Emma ever again. In the aftermath, they brought the children up from the cellar. Emma ran straight to Sarah, stopping short when she saw the bandage on her mother's arm. "Mama's hurt!" she cried in alarm. Sarah knelt, wincing slightly at the movement. "Just a little scrape, sweetheart, like when you fell and skinned your knee, remember? It will heal quickly." Emma looked skeptical, but allowed herself to be comforted. She glanced at Archer, who stood nearby. "Did you stop the bad men?" "We did," he confirmed. "They won't bother you again." "Promise?" "Promise." Archer's eyes flickered to Sarah as he said it, the word carrying weight beyond its simple meaning. The local sheriff arrived the next morning, alerted by one of Nathan's ranch hands who had hidden during the attack. He took custody of the surviving attackers and recorded statements from everyone at the ranch. "Based on what you've told me, and the evidence your attorney is presenting in Denver, I'd say Elias Sutton will be facing serious charges," the sheriff concluded. "Attempted murder, kidnapping, fraud, and possibly murder if that miner's testimony holds up about the mine collapse." "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "You'll all need to testify once Sutton is apprehended," the sheriff explained. "But given the circumstances, we can arrange for you to stay somewhere safe until the trial." "They can remain here," Nathan offered. "My ranch is defensible, and after last night, I doubt Sutton's remaining men will be eager to return." The sheriff nodded. "That seems reasonable, especially with federal marshals likely to arrive within days to provide additional protection." After the sheriff departed with his prisoners, life at the ranch settled into an uneasy calm. Sarah's arm healed quickly, though she carried the bandage as a visible reminder of how close they had come to disaster. 3 days after the attack, a telegram arrived from Denver. Nathan read it aloud to the group gathered around the dinner table. "Sutton arrested. Stop federal marshals found evidence of additional crimes. Stop trial date set next month. Stop remain at current location. Stop Marshal Dawson." Emma, not fully understanding the significance, continued eating her dinner, but the adults exchanged relieved glances. "It's really over," Sarah said softly. "The hard part is," Archer amended, "there's still the trial, but with the evidence Berkshire collected and the testimony of Sutton's captured men, his conviction is all but certain." That night when the house was quiet, Sarah found Archer sitting on the porch steps, staring at the star-filled sky. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "What will you do now?" she asked. He considered the question. "I've been thinking about that. The Sullivans mentioned they could use help expanding their cattle operation." "You'd stay here?" Sarah couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "I might." Archer turned to look at her. "If I had reason to." The implication hung in the air between them. Sarah took a deep breath. "When William died, I thought I'd never feel safe again. Then when Sutton threatened Emma, I knew I'd do anything to protect her, even if it meant living in fear forever. And now? Now I want more than just safety. I want a home for Emma, a real home, not just a hiding place." Sarah gathered her courage. "And I want to stop running. To build something new." Archer's hand found hers in the darkness. "With me?" he asked, his voice betraying rare vulnerability. Sarah turned her hand to lace her fingers through his. "Yes, with you, if that's what you want. I've wanted it since I saw you standing in that sheriff's office, soaking wet and more determined than any person I'd ever met." Archer's thumb stroked over her knuckles. "I just never thought someone like you would consider someone like me." "Someone like you," Sarah echoed. "You mean the man who helped a stranger recover her kidnapped child, who risked his life to gather evidence against a powerful enemy, who treats my daughter with kindness and patience." A smile touched his lips. "When you put it that way," Sarah leaned closer, "that's exactly how I put it." In the silver moonlight, Archer's eyes searched hers, finding only certainty. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he bent his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, then deepening as Sarah responded, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest. When they finally parted, Archer rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably mention that I don't have much to offer beyond myself. No fortune, no fine house." I've had fortune and a fine house, Sarah replied. Neither brought me happiness in the end. What you offer is worth far more safety, respect, and companionship. She paused. And Emma adores you. The feeling is mutual. She's an extraordinary child. Archer's expression grew serious. I want you to know that I would never try to replace her father. But I would protect and care for her as my own. I know you would. Sarah's heart felt full to bursting. That's part of why I love you. The words slipped out naturally, surprising them both. Archer's arms tightened around her. I love you too, Sarah Abernathy, and I promise you won't ever have to run again. The trial of Elias Sutton became a sensation in Denver. Sarah testified about his threats and the kidnapping of Emma, while Berkshire presented the evidence of financial fraud and the forged documents. The captured kidnappers, facing lengthy sentences themselves, testified that Sutton had ordered Emma's abduction and Sarah's elimination if necessary. Most damning was the testimony of the miner who witnessed the sabotage that killed William Abernathy. Though Sutton's expensive lawyers tried to discredit him, the jury found his account compelling. After 2 weeks of testimony, Elias Sutton was found guilty on all counts, including the murder of William Abernathy. The judge sentenced him to hang, a verdict that brought Sarah no joy but did provide a sense of closure. More important to her was the court's ruling that all property and assets fraudulently obtained by Sutton be returned to Emma as William's rightful heir, with Sarah as her guardian. The fortune wouldn't be vast, Sutton had squandered much of it, but it would be enough to secure Emma's future. When the trial concluded, Sarah, Archer, and Emma returned to the Sullivan Ranch. Over dinner that evening, Sarah made an announcement. I've been thinking about what to do next, she said, glancing at Archer, who sat beside her. The court has restored my legal identity as Sarah Abernathy, and Emma's inheritance is secured. You could return to Colorado, Rebecca suggested. Reclaim your position in society. Sarah shook her head. That life holds no appeal for me anymore. Instead, she took Archer's hand. We've decided to stay in Wyoming, to build something new here. Nathan raised his eyebrows. Here on the ranch? If you'll have us as neighbors, Archer clarified. Sarah and I would like to purchase the northern section of your property, the part with the small cabin by the creek. We could help with the cattle operation, as you mentioned needing, Sarah added, and Emma would be close to friends. Nathan and Rebecca exchanged pleased glances. Nothing would make us happier, Rebecca said warmly. Later that week, Sarah and Archer rode to the small cabin by the creek. It was simple but solid, with good bones and a view of the mountains to the west. Standing on what would be their porch, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. It needs work, Archer acknowledged, noting the repairs the roof would require. But by winter, it will be snug and warm. It's perfect, Sarah said, meaning it. Room for us to grow. Archer's arm slipped around her waist. Is that what you want? To grow our family? Sarah turned in his embrace to face him. Yes. Emma has asked twice already if you could be her new papa. And what did you tell her? Archer's voice was husky with emotion. That I needed to ask you first. Sarah's eyes searched his. So I'm asking. Archer knelt before her, taking her hands in his. Sarah Abernathy, I have wandered for most of my life, never finding a place that felt like home until I met you and Emma. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of allowing me to be a father to Emma, and of building a life together here? Tears of happiness blurred Sarah's vision. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. He rose and kissed her, sealing their promise as the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the colors of a new beginning. Their wedding was a simple affair held at the Sullivan Ranch 2 weeks later. Emma served as her mother's attendant, proudly scattering wildflowers along the path to where Archer waited beside the local minister. Sarah wore a new dress of pale blue with flowers in her hair instead of a veil. As they exchanged vows, Sarah felt the weight of the past finally lift from her shoulders. William would always hold a place in her heart as Emma's father and her first love, but Archer represented her future, a future built on mutual respect, shared struggle, and a love that had grown from the seeds of compassion and courage. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared, and Archer kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. That evening, during the celebration dinner at the Sullivan home, Emma climbed onto Archer's lap, regarding him seriously. "Are you my papa now?" she asked, her small fingers playing with one of his shirt buttons. "If you'd like me to be," Archer replied, equally serious. Emma considered this. "I had a papa before, but Mama says he had to go away to heaven." "That's right," Archer nodded, "and he loved you very much. I would never try to replace him in your heart. But I can have two papas, right? One in heaven and one here?" Archer's throat tightened with emotion. "Yes, Emma, you can have two papas." "Good." She nestled against his chest with a contented sigh. "I think I'll call you Papa Archer, so everyone knows which one I'm talking about." Over the child's head, Archer's eyes met Sarah's, both of them moved by Emma's simple acceptance. By the time winter settled over the Wyoming countryside, the cabin by the creek had been transformed. Archer had repaired the roof and added a second bedroom. A barn stood nearby for their horses and the small herd of cattle that represented their contribution to the Sullivan Ranch operations. Inside, the cabin was warm and inviting. Sarah had sewn curtains for the windows and quilts for the beds. A shelf held Emma's books and treasures, and the walls displayed a few precious photographs, including one of William that Sarah kept to ensure Emma would remember her birth father. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell gently outside, the small family sat before the fire. Emma, drowsy with excitement for the next day, leaned against Archer as he read her a story. Sarah watched them from her rocking chair, her hands resting on the gentle swell of her belly where their child grew. When Emma finally dozed off, Archer carried her to her bed and tucked her in, placing a kiss on her forehead. He returned to find Sarah still in her chair, gazing at the fire. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "I was thinking about how much has changed in a year," Sarah replied. "Last Christmas, Emma and I were alone in Montana, constantly looking over our shoulders, afraid of shadows. And now?" Archer took her hand, his thumb brushing over her wedding ring. "Now we have a home. A real home," Sarah smiled, guiding his hand to her stomach. "And a family that's growing." Archer's face lit with the same wonder it showed each time he felt the baby move. "No more running," he promised, echoing words he'd spoken months before. "No more running," Sarah agreed, leaning forward to kiss him. "Only moving forward, together." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the land in a blanket of pristine white. Inside the cabin by the creek, Sarah Abernathy Xavier had finally found what she'd been searching for since fleeing Colorado, not just safety, but a place to belong, a name to claim proudly, and a love strong enough to heal even the deepest wounds. She had her daughter, her name, and now a husband who had helped her reclaim both. And in the warmth of that knowledge, Sarah finally, truly came home.